My name is Andrew, and this is Rogue Wrenching. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're doing a fuel pump on a 2008 Mercury Mariner. Okay, before we jump in, I want to talk real quick about safety. You can see I'm wearing gloves. That's because we're going to be working with fuel. I don't want to get that on my skin. I don't want to get anything else on my skin, so I'm wearing gloves to protect myself there, and I've got safety glasses. We're working with a fuel system that might still have some pressure in it. There shouldn't be, because it's been sitting for 2 days, so there shouldn't be any pressure in it. But just in case, I've got safety glasses on because this is cheap insurance, and if you're not wearing safety glasses when you're working on cars, you really should be. Okay, in addition to your PPE, your gloves, safety glasses, you're gonna need a hammer, a medium Phillips head screwdriver, a large flathead screwdriver, and that's it. So where is the fuel pump located on a Mercury Mariner? Right here. Pop the door. Flip the seat forward. And there it is. So we're going to take our Phillips head screwdriver and pop these 4 screws out. Okay, and there's the fuel pump right there. This little white piece underneath, that's our fuel sending assembly. So we've got a wire here, is the actual power wire that goes down into the pump, and that's just a sensor in the evap system, which we're going to disconnect and move out of the way. We're going to disconnect the electrical wiring first. A little push tab on the top, push down, comes apart. And then on this guy, same deal, just going to push down, wiggle a little bit, and it'll come off. And so then that guy can flex a little bit and kind of tuck up out of our way so we have room to get this pump out. Tuck the wiring out of the way, which leaves us with 2 fuel lines. So this is where it's really important to allow the vehicle to sit long enough so there's no residual pressure in the system. Even if you do that, there may still be a little bit of pressure. So again, safety glasses are super important. These fuel lines are super easy to take off. There's no special tool required. There's a locking tab under each side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my fingers, I'm gonna come underneath, squeeze the bottom tabs, and lift the little blue part up. So we're gonna get underneath, squeeze the tabs, and work that little blue guy up. And the same thing with that white one. Push the tabs up, pull that little guy up, and then gently wiggle and pull the line off. There's one. Oop, see, a little bit of fuel right there. Very, very important to wear safety glasses. Okay, so now we've got electrical connector disconnected. Both fuel lines are off. We're just going to kind of push them out of the way so they're not in our way. And then this green ring here needs to rotate counterclockwise. So basically, if you were unscrewing it, it's got to turn just a little bit, and then it'll pop up and the fuel pump will slide right out. There is a tool for removing that lock ring, but a hammer and a screwdriver works just fine as well. Okay. And there it is. So you guys saw how little turn we had to get on that ring to get it to come out. Once that ring is out, we're going to push this sensor back a little bit and lift that ring out. Just set that aside for now. And now the fuel pump will lift right up. Depending on how old it is, how long it's been in there, it might require a little bit of prying. So just grab your large flathead, reach under the edge of it, and pop it up. So there's an O-ring inside of here that sits right in this little groove. We want to make sure that we don't drop that inside, so I'm going to go ahead and slip that off the top before we go any further. That way we don't lose it. There's the O-ring. So I'm going to hold these guys out with that hand. I'm going to lift this pump up and out of there. I'm going to attempt to tip it a little bit to try to drain some of the fuel out of the bottom bowl so we don't make a mess inside the vehicle. Pop the sock out, and you can see here we're dripping a bit, so I'm just going to try to tip it and pour some of that fuel out so we don't get it in the interior of this car. There we go. Get as much out of there as we can. Okay, and then we got to have this at an angle so we don't bend that float valve coming out. There's the float. One thing to know about installing the OE pump on this is it doesn't come with that rubber O-ring we just saw. So that has to be purchased separately. So if you're going to do this repair to your vehicle, make sure you get the O-ring and the pump if you're buying Motorcraft. Most aftermarket ones come with a new O-ring. The factory one does not. So again, aftermarket lasted 6 months. Factory, the original one in this car, lasted 12 years. So we attempted the aftermarket Spectre Premium. Bad idea, don't go with it. Had a problem a couple weeks ago where this hose right here popped off, which left the car in a no start condition. So buy the factory one. If you don't, you'll end up buying it later. This O-ring needs to be lubricated in order for it to work properly and not leak. So if you don't have anything on hand, but you have a car, let me show you a quick trick. This isn't the best way to do it, but it's a way that will complete the repair in a acceptable fashion and get you back going on the road if you don't have anything else. I would recommend using clean motor oil or something like that to lubricate it, because you might not have that on hand. We're going to pull the dipstick and show you how to use the oil that's already in the engine. Just need a little bit to lubricate this O-ring. Okay, so we're gonna open up the O-ring, get it out of its package first. You don't want to use a knife to open this package because you don't want to risk hurting the O-ring. So here we've got the O-ring. I'm gonna pull the dipstick out. I'm just gonna dribble a little bit of oil on it. Do that a couple of times here. I'm going to take my gloved hand and just kind of smear it all around. So when we're done, the O-ring's kind of got that glossy shininess to it because it's got oil all over it. So that will lubricate our O-ring sufficiently so we can install it without having any leaks. I'm going to take a rag and I'm going to wipe out this channel in here where that O-ring lies, just to make sure there's no contaminants of any kind that could cause it to not seal. So any kind of dirt or anything, I want to make sure that's out of there. Because if there's a little chunk of debris or something in there, that will keep it from sealing. That'll give you a check engine light or evap leak, something like that. You don't want that to happen. The idea is you fix it right the first time. But when you're setting this in, you want to dip the float there, dip that guy in there first, and then kind of roll the pump housing down and in. Being careful not to let anything damage it on its way in. And there we go. Okay, so now that we're close, I'm going to go ahead and slip in our O-ring that we just lubricated. So again, without dropping this into the tank, just going to set that O-ring in its channel. There we go. So now it's sitting flush. There are a couple of locating tabs that line this pump up, but you can get a pretty good idea by which direction the lines face. So we're just going to face them about the right direction and feel it into place. There it is. And there it's dropped down, we're sitting flush, everybody's nice and happy. So now we're gonna apply some downward pressure to this thing and keep that pressure. So I'm gonna keep holding the pump down while I install the ring that retains it and holds it in place. So it's a little bit of a game to get it around everything without breaking. These lines are fairly fragile, so you want to be real careful and not hurt the hard plastic ends. Because if that breaks, that's not covered under warranty. We're just going to get that ring in there. And line her on up. So now that I've got the ring really close to going in, I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver and just kind of push the ring down and in and try to get it to catch. This is probably the most challenging part of the whole thing, is getting this ring back installed, because you have to push down and turn all at the same time. Sometimes it fights you. There we go. So again, this is 100 times easier with the correct factory part. So I can't stress this enough. Buy Motorcraft for this application. Okay, so the ring has been started, so now we have to hammer it and get it to lock all the way into position. You want to make sure this ring goes all the way in, because if it doesn't and it comes loose, you're going to have all kinds of problems. Okay, there's a little nub right under here that has to go into a groove in the black tab. So if you see the little nub, it's really hard to see on this camera, but there's a nub right there. It has to be under this black tab. So it'll go in and lock. That's what's gonna keep this thing from vibrating loose and coming out while you're driving. Okay, so now that our lock ring is installed, we're gonna go ahead and hook up our fuel lines and then our electrical connections. So we'll get the wire out of the way. Pop these little protective caps off. I always like to leave these caps in until the part is installed. That way you don't risk any kind of contamination getting into the fuel system. So with this, blue is the front one, white is the back one, but you can't screw it up because they're different sizes. So push the fuel line on, and push the lock tab down, and give it a little bit of a pull just to make sure that it's seated correctly. Because if you push the lock tab down before it goes on and you pull on it, it'll pop off. So you want to push it all the way on. Push that tab out. Push all the way on, lock tab, and then give it a little tug just to make sure that it's not going to come loose. Then we've got our evap sensor here. I'm going to plug that guy back in. And then the actual fuel pump wiring. Plug that guy in. Lay everything flat in there. Set our cover back in. Just making sure that we don't have any wiring or anything pinched along the outside edges. Put in your 4 screws. Half the battle of being an automotive technician is figuring out how to improvise, how to make things work that shouldn't work. So here, we're missing a screw. It's important that we seal this up completely, so I have a drywall screw. I've already verified that this won't poke through to anything underneath when I screw it in. If I can get through this little clip here. And then there we go. So now I've got 4 points of holding this down. There's a foam seal under here. If that seal is torn, you're going to want to replace it. And that's about all there is to it. Flop your carpet back over, pick up your tools, and you're done. Okay, so now the fuel pump is in. It's time to see if this car will start. Key in. I can hear the fuel pump run when I cycle the key. That's a good thing. That means we got it all plugged in right. And here we go. Fires up, seems to run good. Let's grab the scan tool and just double check the data we were looking at before when it died and make sure that the problem is completely fixed and there's nothing else we need to do. Okay, so in the last video when the car died, if you remember the numbers on the scan tool we were looking at full duty cycle, which is 48%, and we were seeing fuel rail pressure at 1.6 to 1.7 volts at idle, and then we tipped into it, we got down to about a volt. So 2.8 volts is 30 psi, which is what it should be sitting at normal curb idle. So right now we have 2.8 volts and we're duty cycling the pump at 17%. So that means that we're running the pump at about a third of what it's capable of, and we're achieving way more pressure than the old pump was making. So this confirms the fix. So now we've verified the fix is a good fix, that the car is running right, it is developing the correct amount of fuel pressure. So this car is fixed. I'm probably going to drive it tomorrow, put a few miles on it just to make 100% sure, but we never achieved this high of fuel pressure on the old pump. So the old pump never put out the fuel pressure that it should, which could have also contributed to reduced fuel economy, higher tailpipe emissions. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong when your fuel pressure isn't right. So we've got a new OE pump in the car and it is fixed. We are good to go. If you guys like this video, hit that thumbs up button, give us a like. If you're interested in more DIY videos, anything relating to automotive, smash that subscribe button. There's all kinds of more content coming up in the very near future. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one.